So today, Joe Biden officially signed the new stimulus bill into law, and I've tried to cover it as much as I can on this show throughout the process. And like I've stated time and time again, I think this is a horrific stimulus bill. And yes, I'll acknowledge that there were some good things in there. Of course, if you give any money to people who need cash, that is objectively a good thing. But on the whole, the bill itself is terrible because and my metric for judging whether or not this bill, a stimulus bill, or any other particular legislation or any other legislation in general, the standard I use to judge whether or not it's good or bad isn't does it do some good things for some people? Because of course you can put a provision to do some good things in any legislation, but if if it's a net negative, then it's a negative bill, regardless of the fact that it does some good for some people. And specifically talking about the stimulus bill, my standards for this stimulus bill, the previous one, the CARES Act, my standard for whether or not it's a good bill is, does it actually meet the scale of the crisis? The worst public health emergency of our lifetime and the worst economic crisis in U.S. history. This is the worst emergency in U.S. history. So are the programs and the provisions in this bill, do they meet the scale of the crisis? Objectively, no, they do not. A one-time means-tested $1,400 check, which you means-tested 17 million more people out of, that doesn't meet the scale of this crisis. A $3,000 child tax credit, one, for the families who receive that tax credit, that's not as much as they should have been getting from the government over this last year during this crisis. And then on top of that, it leaves out, again, more means testing, leaves out millions and millions more people who do need the money, but they just don't have children. And in regards to healthcare, over 100 million people can't afford basic healthcare at this point. Either have no insurance or they can't afford to use their insurance. And the only thing that this bill does to address healthcare in the middle of the worst public health emergency of our lifetime is give blank checks to private health insurance companies to try to subsidize their costs, instead of trying to move us towards a single-payer healthcare system. So, does it meet the scale of the crisis? Absolutely not. And does it do enough? Does it do anything at all, really, to address the systemic problems that we're dealing with? The long-term economic scarring that this calamity has brought into this country. Because what happened last year, it's not like that wasn't a small thing. Over 60 million people losing their jobs in a year, 40 million people facing eviction, 60% of small businesses closed permanently. That's not a small thing. That permanently changed the trajectory of the economy that was already rigged against the working class, the middle class, and the poor. We were already living through historic, unprecedented wealth inequality. So for that to compound on top of the situation, the pre-COVID situation, we need radical systemic changes to try to deal with this economic devastation that the bottom 70% of the country, bottom 60% of the country is going to have to deal with. We need UBI, monthly recurring checks, universal checks to everybody in this country, no means testing. At least $3,500 at this point, and make it retroactive for the entire year they try to go without giving us monthly checks. That's something that addresses some of the systemic inequality and some of the long-term effects, permanent effects of what happened is going to have on the economy. Canceling the rent and mortgage debts that people have over this crisis. This should just be completely eliminated. This bill doesn't do that. Medicare for all, single payer, like I mentioned earlier, public health emergency, a third of the country can't afford healthcare, and of course the worst economic crisis in history, and we pay more than any other country for healthcare, and we get even less coverage. So single payer would save money, cover everybody, and the tens of thousands of people who die every year because they can't afford basic healthcare, that number would go to zero because you wouldn't have to pay anything out of pocket. It would be free at the point of service whenever you go to the doctor, the emergency room, or wherever you go to get medical treatment. That is something that should have been put in this stimulus bill or any of the other previous stimulus bills to actually meet this moment and address the systemic inequalities in our system. That wasn't in this bill, and none of that was even part of the discussion. So when you factor in, does it meet the scale of the crisis? Does it address the systemic problems? And of course, another thing to do with systemic problems is having workers own the means of production and have a say in the management of the company, because the way workers were treated in this crisis is completely inexcusable. They've been forced to risk their lives, many of these frontline workers, with no pay raise. And all while this is happening, the executives that own their companies are making out like bandits. Amazon, for example, Jeff Bezos doubled his wealth during all of this. And so we need to have a conversation about corporate power and how to address that. And that should have been in the stimulus bill too. So when you consider all of the things that were left out of it, and then to add insult to injury, the fact that the Democrats passed this bill without a single Republican vote. So they didn't even have the cover to be like, oh, we had to make it more shitty to get the Republicans to go along with it. Democrats have control of the House, they have control of the Senate, and they have control of the White House. So for the party who claims to be representing the working class and the poor in this country, you had absolutely no reason to leave out those policies that I mentioned before. So like I said, this bill is a net negative because it does not meet the scale of the crisis, and the economic devastation will just continue to be exacerbated and compound because they weren't addressed in this bill. And to add insult on top of the insult, not only did they not do those things, they went in the complete opposite direction, like I mentioned earlier. They means tested 17 million more people out of getting this pathetic one-time means tested check. 17 million less people will get stimulus checks under the complete control of government of Democrats than they got stimulus checks when Donald Trump was the president and Republicans controlled the Senate. Make that make sense to me. So this whole shit is fucked up. Nobody should be getting any credit. And that's another thing. None of these politicians deserve any credit for this because it's way past a day late and a dollar short. If they passed this stimulus bill, this very same stimulus bill, in June of last year, it would still be inadequate. So with all that is going on and the chaos, the economic destruction in this country that has happened over the last year, and this is your response, that's unexcusable. And I don't care if they gave a $1,400 check. I don't care about the $3,000 tax credit. They didn't even do the bare minimum of what they are needed to do to provide for their constituents in this emergency. So I'm not in the business of trying to be fair or this false neutrality of, oh, we have to acknowledge the good things, but yeah, there's some things we don't like, but hey, 50-50. I'm not in that bullshit at all. So that brings me to the topic of this video. So Krystal Ball, and to her credit, like I've mentioned many times on the show, she has been very critical of the Democratic Party, the political establishment, and the way that they've handled this crisis, the way that they've left the public for dead. And so, and Krystal Ball, Saga and Jetty at the Hill are one of the very few people in at some sort of corporate media, because the Hill is technically corporate media. One of the very few people in that space who are actually trying to, who try to tell a more accurate picture of what's actually happening in the economy. So I give them credit for that. But and specifically about the stimulus bill, she has been a very vocal critic about how the way that Democrats have been handling this bill, how they took $15 minimum wage out of this bill, how it means testing the checks, and how it's a one-time check, and all those things, and the subsidies to Cobra and private health insurance industry. She's been critical of all those things. So I'll give her credit on that. But she did a video, and or her and Soccer, they did a segment. And in the segment, similar to how they've talked about the other stimulus bills that ended up passing over this crisis, they try to do I don't know if they're trying to look for silver linings here, but they really did they were trying to sell this stimulus bill as if it was some really good thing. And I believe, in fact, in the segment, she even says this is a good bill. And they're like trying to praise it and talk it up and like really try to sell the good aspects of the stimulus bill. While, of course, like I said, they have their criticisms, but just in general, the read was, oh, it's a good thing. And this is something that I've noticed a lot with Rising and other people in new media, where they feel like, and I think it's a lot of it is the circles that they run in and the elites who they have conversations with, all the blue checkmark people on Twitter. Krystal Ball has many friends at MSNBC. She used to work at MSNBC. All the people, the Democratic strategists that they talk to, all the people, the staffers of these politicians, all these people that they interact with, that they talk to about these things, I feel like they go, and it's not just with Rising, TYT, I mean, if you want to call them, I mean, whatever you want to say about them, but they do it too. Kyle Klinsky does it. Other people do it in the news media space, where they feel the need to go over the top and try to be fair to avoid the criticisms that they're being unfair. So they, in a way, they've kind of adopted this neutrality bias. And of course, like I said, they have their harsh criticisms, but they will go over the top to make it seem like they're not being too unfair to Joe Biden. And I've heard Krystal and Kyle say this all the time, like, oh, I really want to, I wish Joe Biden would do this because I want to give credit to him. I desperately want to give Joe Biden credit. I want to be fair to Joe Biden. Like, why? Why do you want to be fair to Joe Biden? With his, as shitty as he is, as corrupt as he is, as much of a liar and somebody who will screw over the left and the working class in the country at the drop of a dime, why are you bending over backwards to be fair to him? Just so you can maintain this idea of being objective and being neutral or whatever it is. So this is I think this is part of a larger discussion that needs to be had about the role of new media, left new media, because you don't need to be overly fair to the corrupt politicians. You don't need to be overly fair to these establishment politicians, because they're, like we talk about, there's class warfare and they're on the wrong side of class warfare, and they're actively trying to screw over most of the country on behalf of their personal, for their personal benefit and the benefit of their corporate donors. So these are some of the most insidious, nefarious people in the country, implementing some of the most harmful policies. So, like, why do you feel the need to be fair to them? Why do you feel the need that if you're going to do a segment about the stimulus bill, half of it has to be you talking about the good stuff in it? Like, and this isn't me saying lie about these politicians and lie about their positions and make shit up just to make them look bad. I'm not saying that at all. But you don't have to be, you don't, like, this whole, like I said, this false neutrality of, oh, if I say something bad about him, I have to also say this good thing about him. Like, you don't have to do that. And like I said, the role of left new media, there's more than enough people, more than enough sources doing unapologetic propaganda for the Democrats and Joe Biden. There are enough people going over the top and pretending like this was a fucking New Deal or something. There are enough people acting like through this weak ass legislation they're gonna like eliminate poverty or whatever. There's enough people doing that shit. So what I think left new media should be doing is trying to counter that, not try to be like in the middle between what we should be actually have and try to give credit for what they did. We should be way past that, and the most of our discussions about these things should be just the harsh critiques, because like I said, there's enough people singing Joe Biden's praises over this shitty ass stimulus bill and leaving out all the context that we're supposed to be covering. So just on a purely objective time management point of view, if they spend all of their time manufacturing consent and pretending like this was actually a good stimulus bill that meets the moment, and then you spend half your time doing that and then the other half criticizing it, well, a lot of people are going to take away their takeaway. People who don't follow this closely, the takeaway is going to be like, hey man, everybody's saying that there's some good shit in there. I mean, it can't be that bad, right? So like I said, I think the role of left wing media should just be to really focus on what's not in this bill and how this comes woefully short of meeting the moment in a time where we're in the worst emergency in U.S. history. So yeah, people are going to try to say that, oh, you're just being overly negative and you're not talking about positive. Oh, well, who cares? There's enough people doing propaganda for Joe Biden. You don't need the very few spaces in left new media to join in half the time and sing his praises when they really don't deserve it. Like I said, none of them deserve any credit for the shitty stimulus bill. So I have the clip. I'll come back and break it down. But first, you guys already know the deal. If you're able to contribute to the show financially, I have the links to Patreon and the about page of the YouTube channel. You can sign up and do different subscription levels, monthly subscriptions. I have like $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever. And I don't do Patreon exclusive content because I just want this content to be available to everybody, regardless if you can pay for it or not. So it's just a way to help support the show and not even really think about it. I also have a link to PayPal in the about page of the YouTube channel if you feel more comfortable doing a one-time contribution. And as always, incredibly grateful for all the people who have contributed financially, all the people who show up and watch the videos, the people who share the videos, the people who leave all the amazing comments that, yes, I do read all of them. You guys have helped me grow the show. You guys help me do what I love. So I can never say thank you enough. So I'm going to play the clip and then I'm going to come back and break it down.
Really bad for the past year, especially targeted. And this bill actually, I know there's been a lot of talk about like, oh, it's not targeted well, but actually it really is, because the people at the top get nothing from this bill. And as you go down,
right?
If you go down the income brackets, you get higher and higher amounts that are going to the people who are most in need. And we know how this crisis has hit those in lower income, working class, working poor, middle class people have been hit the most. So it actually is pretty well targeted in that regard. And again, like, I have a lot of issues with this bill. I don't think it goes nearly far enough. I think the fact that its provisions are temporary is a massive missed opportunity. You got people out there who are saying, like, this is the biggest deal since LBJ and all of that. I think that's completely overblown and ridiculous, given the fact that none of it lasts for longer than a year. But it is genuinely going to help a lot of people right now when there is a great need. And the fact that the Republicans didn't even try to negotiate the things that they would want and were just completely absent from the debate, it's an embarrassment.
They have a big problem. Look, the average American family of four, what is it? Below $150K, they're going to get $7,600 in cash. $7,600. Like I said, we cannot comprehend the economic growth figures that we're going to see in the third and fourth quarter, and especially in 2022. It's going to be insane. And And as people begin to tune out the news, as we've seen, 30% reduction in online news coverage, except for Rising, which is doing completely fine. You can go and see people are tuning out. People are going to go on vacation. They're going to buy new stuff. They're going to buy new cars. They're going to go out with their families. They are going, I mean, for the stories I've heard from what the streets of New York are like during good weather, it's going to be a wild summer, folks. It's going to be something that I think is going to be like a jubilation that we have not seen in America. Basically like the 1920s, like everybody was predicting post-Spanish flu. That's all really good.
All right, so let me address the first point that she makes, that this bill is well targeted. I highly disagree with that. Yes, they gave money to families, but if that's your only requirement to say that it's well targeted, I mean, that's a really, really low bar. Well, so like, all right, how can this be? First of all, the fact that it's targeted is a problem because, like I've talked about from the beginning of this crisis, the means testing, when you do that, you inevitably make it so that there will be people who need the money who won't get the money. So when you means test it, right off the bat, it's not well targeted because you're not getting money to everybody who needs it. So, but if she wants, I'm be in the most generous interpretation I can give to her, that she means just in general, it's well targeted because, hey, look, it gives money to families and there's a cutoff for people who make a certain amount. Okay, but it gives money to families. What about the people who are single and they don't have families? And they're completely left out of like the child tax credit, which is the biggest amount of cash that's available. What about those people? What about the people who didn't qualify for any of the stimulus bills, any of the stimulus checks, and won't qualify for this stimulus check because they didn't file a tax return in 2019? Or they just turned 18, this is their first year working, or they just went away to college, and then they lost their job and all of that in 2020. But because they didn't file the 2019 tax return, they didn't. They won't qualify for a stimulus check. What about those people? So what about the people who are disabled? So to say that it's well targeted just because it gives money to family, you're just completely leaving out all the people who need the money that won't get it. What about all the homeless people in this country? What about them? Is there anything in it for them? So no, it isn't well targeted because if it was well targeted, all the people who need money would get it. And that's not what's in there. And then to the fact about, to the point that she makes about, it only goes, there's no money for the rich in here. It only goes to poor and working people in this country. I strongly disagree with that because, first of all, there are COBRA subsidies in there. Subsidies to the private health insurance industry. Those are blank checks that the government is writing to pay these companies exorbitant amounts for healthcare or health insurance, and a large portion of that is going to go to the executives of these companies. I'd say, and there's billions of dollars put aside for those health insurance companies. I'd say that's a lot of money going to wealthy people in that stimulus bill. But more than that, what do you think people are going to use that money on? The people who get the stimulus bill. They're going to use that to pay their rent, to pay their mortgage. And that money is inevitably going to go to the banks, the people who own would own the mortgage, the creditors involved in the process. So it's, you put money in the pockets of regular people, but that money's immediately going to go to keep the utilities on or to pay the mortgage. And where does that go? Big corporations. So it's kind of like misleading to say that, it's just for regular people, as if this is just, like a investment in their future and they have free reign to use the money and no, they're going to use this to give it to people that they owe debts to. And a lot of times those are debts held by large corporations. So that part's kind of misleading. And then they just go completely over the top in the next point. So Saga is like, oh, so if your family making less than 100K, then you're going to get $7,600 from the stimulus bill. Is $7,600 a lot for poor people? Yes. Is it anywhere near the assistance that the government should have been providing this entire time? Absolutely not. If the government was doing what they should have, providing $3,000 UBI to every man, woman, and child in this country, a family of four would have gotten maybe $100,000 by now. So the fact that they're like, oh my God, $7,600, Jesus, they're swimming in cash. Like that, again, completely missing the context that that's not even 10% of what the government should have been providing during this entire time. And also, it's not anything that's continual. It's just a one-time thing. And also, $7,600. If you haven't had a job over this last year, if you lost your job, if you have months in back rent, which millions of people in this country do have months in back rent, say you have 6 months in back rent, 7 months in back rent, what do you think all that money is going to go to? Or you're behind on utilities, or you're behind on your car payment, you're behind on your credit card payment. Like, yes, some people will take that money and they will spend it on things that make them happy. And I will never try to shit on them for doing that. But to act like, oh, we put $7,600 in the pockets of a family of four, and therefore it's going to be like the roaring 20s. Everybody just has cash and he said it will bring jubilation to the country. Jubilation, $7,600. While we don't have health care, while 40 million people are about to be evicted, while 60% of small businesses are closed, 60 million people lost their job over last year. And of certain families of four that qualify for $7,600, that will lead to jubilation and a roaring economy. Like, when they say shit like that, it reminds me that there's only so far that their worldview will allow them to go in terms of understanding the real economic devastation in this country. Because if you're one of the regular people in this country, who's like really have it bad in the food lines, you're months behind on rent, months behind on utility, months behind on your car payment. People, a one-time $7,600 payment, that's not going to change your life. But that's what they're acting like here. So it comes off as incredibly out of touch. I just have to say that. And also in this video, I'm not even sure if it was in the clip that I showed, but they continue the propaganda that's being put out about, oh, this bill is going to eliminate or cut child poverty in half. There's several points I want to make about that. But first of all, that is just rank propaganda at this point. Because first of all, the poverty line for the poverty line in this country in general is way lower than what it means to be in poverty in this country. I think it's like $12,000 a year for an individual, and for a family, if you're making like $25,000 a year, family of four, you're technically not even considered being in poverty. So the poverty line is extremely low. And like, the math just doesn't add up. If we had the economic devastation that we had for the entire year before, and the solutions to that would have been UBI, Medicare for all, rent, mortgage cancellation, and they decidedly did none of those things, and all they did was a $1,400 check, and we're just talking about families here, the $3,000 per child tax credit. How is that, which, again, if we were just going by the UBI alone, that's not even 10% of what the government should have been giving those families. So how is that going to cut child poverty in half? Like, that doesn't, the numbers don't add up there. Well, but maybe it does for the official poverty line, which is bullshit, because you can make more than that and still be in poverty in this country. So it is really just a talking point, and it really is just a propaganda to manufacture consent and make this bill look like it's better than it is. And it's kind of sad that so many people in left new media just ran with this and have been repeating this nonstop as if like it will actually cut child poverty in half. No, it won't. More than that. So, you know how we talk about poverty is a policy choice? So you mean to tell me they did this legislation and they're going to brag about how it cuts child poverty in half? Why didn't you just completely eliminate child poverty? Make that make sense to me. If all it took was $7,600 to a family of four to cut child poverty in half, why didn't you just double it up and just completely eliminate child poverty? So even if you want to take this, give them the best interpretation of events here, they're still choosing to let half of the children in the United States live in poverty, completely arbitrarily, and just because they drew some random line in the sand and said, and off of some austerity bullshit, and say we can't spend more than this, so half the children will remain in poverty. But at least we solved the problem for half of the other half. So that's a very weird thing. So yeah, it's just, I feel like left new media needs to be a lot more critical, and they need to get over this whole let me do this false neutrality in the both sides. So there's some good here, there's some bad, but let's talk about them both equally. Like, just drop that shit completely and stick to the harsh critiques, because that's what the moment calls for. Because nobody else is going to do it. Nobody else is going to tell the truth about how this doesn't come anywhere close to meeting the moment. So the few people who understand that should just be the message, period. Fuck the both sides, fuck the false neutrality. The message should just be, this isn't enough, and the American people need to know that this isn't enough, and they should be demanding more from the government. So, bizarre segment from Krystal and Sagar here.